name is Lucia. I lived in Rome, long, long before you were born. I lived during the 4th century, from about 300 to 352 AD. At that time, Rome was very important. It had a big empire. The Roman emperor was very powerful. He had taken control of countries all over Europe. The Roman emperor was like a king of many countries. There were political problems, and things were always changing. As I was growing up, I didn't really understand what was going on. But I knew that the emperor was a very important person in Rome. I was born deaf. My mother and father were ashamed because I was deaf. They thought that I would give their family a bad name, but they still loved me, and I loved them too.
Oh, don't you dare.
My mother always told me that because I was deaf, I wouldn't be able to learn things like my hearing brother. He had everything. He went to school to learn things, but I couldn't because I was deaf. But I did learn some things, and do you know how? From the marketplace where I met other deaf people. At that time, there was no school or deaf club, so it was hard to meet other deaf people. But I met them in the marketplace when I was there with my mother and father. I'd meet deaf people there and go up and talk with them in sign language. My mother and father would go to the market to buy food and sell things, and I'd sneak away and talk with the deaf people. It was wonderful. I learned a lot from them. With sign language, we were able to communicate. For example, young deaf children could come to the market too, and they'd learn to sign by watching us. We'd teach them by signing to them, and they'd watch and learn signing from us. It was wonderful. I learned a lot from them just by going there and mixing with them. It wasn't easy to set up a deaf club at that time, but it was good to mingle and sign with them all. Some deaf people were able to work, selling things in the market, but the rest of us weren't allowed to. I didn't understand that. Then I realized that those deaf people who had their own businesses had become deaf later in their lives, and the rest of us were actually born deaf. The two groups were different, but I didn't really understand about that. Later, I discovered that there was a law which explained it all. I found out about it when I wanted to get married. The Roman emperor's laws were very detailed. They set out a lot of little rules that controlled what people could and couldn't do, when people were allowed to do something or not allowed. It was always because of the law. The law said if we were born deaf or couldn't speak, we weren't allowed to do a lot of things. For example, we couldn't have our own businesses, we couldn't receive pay for our work, we couldn't get married, and if our parents died and left some money, it couldn't be given to a deaf son, only to a hearing brother. We couldn't go to school. There were many things that we weren't allowed to do. The Roman emperor made the law because he thought that if deaf people couldn't speak, they couldn't think properly. He didn't understand that we just had a different language. My boyfriend Horatio and I were very disappointed about that Roman law. We explained the problem to our deaf friends. There were so many things that we weren't allowed to do. It was very discouraging. Some deaf people who could speak were fine. They were allowed to do whatever they wanted, but we weren't. It was very hard to put up with. Our deaf friends said we couldn't do anything about it. We just had to accept it. One day I heard about a new religious group called the Christians. Some deaf people lived with them. I was very interested in this group, so I tried to find out more about them. I found out that they had their own set of beliefs and ideas. They had their own rules, and they were sometimes different from the Roman laws. I found out that the Christians allowed deaf people to marry. Horatio and I were very keen to find out more, so we went off to look for them. It was really hard to find the Christians in the places that they lived, not easy at all. But we finally found them and went in and talked with them. We were amazed to find that they could use sign language, and we could talk to them. I really liked that group's ideas and beliefs. Horatio and I agreed we were very happy there and decided to join the Christian group and their little deaf community. After a while, we decided we were happy together and wanted to get married. So we went to the Christian group and asked their leader, "Can we get married in your group?" The leader said, "Oh yes, you can get married." We were so excited. Finally, our wedding day arrived. The leader of the Christians married us using sign language. It was a beautiful day. We looked at each other, and it felt so good to be there in that little deaf community among the Christians. I was sad that my mother and father weren't there, and some of our other deaf friends weren't there. It wasn't that they disapproved. They just didn't know about the deaf Christian community and what was happening there. Not yet. We were just a small group then, the deaf Christians, a close little community. We have had a really happy marriage. But it's a hard life in Rome. We'd love to have our own business and work and earn money to have a lovely home. My husband Horatio has a wealthy father, and he owns 4 or 5 houses. It would be lovely if he could give one of his houses to my husband, but he can't because he's deaf. The Christian group has its own beliefs and laws, but they can't completely ignore the Roman emperor's laws. Sometimes they have no choice and have to follow some of those laws. Even if they can ignore others, there's nothing they can do about it. And what about you? Do you have a good life? Do you have better opportunities and better laws? I don't know, but I hope you have good laws that make things better for you in the future. We didn't, but we still had a very happy relationship, and we enjoyed going through life together.